You down one this way.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
Wait, I said this way. Okay, so sit. Come back this way.
Bob, yeah.
I saw that. No, we saw that.
Did he pick the spots and everything?
No, we're all in all these spots. You're on your
All right, we're going to get started in just a second, but before we do, the first thing that we do that helps us to, hi, I'm Rabbi Hyatt, and I'm really honored to be with you this morning. Before we begin our service, we are going to do a brief ceremony called Kriya, which means tearing. And traditionally, those that participate in the ceremony of tearing are the parents, siblings, children, and spouses of those who we are mourning today. Our tradition has gotten a little expansive with that because it sometimes feels like there are more of us in the family who are really present in this moment. And so at the moment, Judy and Phil are wearing these ribbons. If any of the other grandchildren or great-grandchildren would like to wear a ribbon, I'm super okay with that. And it helps us, like we talked about for those who were with me last night, it helps us to remember that we need a little bit of caretaking. It helps us to remember that it's okay to be in this moment of mourning. I'm just going to offer to those. Okay, and you're going to put them on your right sides of your lapel or sweatshirt. Am I missing? We have, I'm sure.
There are plenty.
Okay. Anybody else need? This is like such a big, beautiful family full of all kinds of love. So the ribbons help us to feel that. Do you have one more? Siempre. Thank you. I gave all mine out.
You have more in your pocket?
Yeah. No, I'm good. Thank you. And certainly nobody's obligated to wear one or to put one on. It's really about what feels comfortable and what helps us to feel sort of present in this day in the way that feels good for each of us. Okay. And in a second, we're going to start. I'm actually going to ask before we do that, for all of those grandchildren who were going to help us be pallbearers, we have preset the casket. I'm going to ask you to come up for a moment. So if you were going to help to carry that casket, can you come up here for just a moment? And if we could just, everybody find a spot that feels safe around. And we're all going to put a hand, all of you, when you are up there, we're all going to put a hand on the bars that help us to carry the casket. And even though we're not going to carry it because it's snowy and it's a little yucky outside, and we made sure that it was here and it was safe, we put our hands on this casket for the last time. And for all of the grandchildren and great-grandchildren that are standing here, knowing that your grandma, Marian, your great-grandma Marian, also Bubby, right? There was a lot of different names for her, that she took care of you for a long time and you helped take care of her in these last years and especially helped to make sure that she is safe and secure here. And so with our hands on her, we just take a moment to acknowledge your role, each of you, in loving her very, very much. And with that, knowing that you're the last that will place your hands onto this piece of wood, I invite you to go back to your seat, and we're going to start our ceremony. Thanks so much. So with that, we are going to begin with the moment of tearing. Those who put on a ribbon, Marian's children on their left side over their heart, and everyone else on the right side. When we tear, we do it for 3 reasons that I learned. The first is that this is hard. It's hard to lose someone we love. And we tear because sometimes it feels good to, I don't know, tear something when we're hurt and we're sad. The second reason why we tear is because this is a big rip in the fabric of your family. And that is a big thing to wrap your head around. None of you have experienced the world without Marian in it. And that's a big change. And the third thing is that this changes your status from people who have taken care of Marian for a while to mourners. I hope that you will let us take care of you now. And so we're going to say a line, then we're going to tear, and then we'll say another few words in Hebrew. I'm going to ask you to repeat after me. Adonai Natan, Adonai Lakach, Yehi Shem, Adonai Mevorach. That means God gives and God takes away. Blessed is the name of God. And for hearts that are torn, we perform this act of tearing. You're going to go ahead and tear your ribbon, maybe just a quarter or a half an inch. And then we say Baruch, Dayan, Ha'emet. Blessed are you, Adonai, judge of truth. And with that, we begin our service today. There are essentially 3 parts of a Jewish funeral. The first thing that we do is prepare ourselves for the hard work of saying goodbye to someone that we loved very much. The second thing that we do is tell the story of her life, a story that is long and beautiful and full of little stories and details, but one that we can't see in its fullness and totality until we get to the end of it. And the third thing that we do is say goodbye to Marian's physical presence here with us, and we will bury her and go through those rituals. And so as we prepare ourselves, I want to share with you a poem. Birth is a beginning and death a destination, and life is a journey from childhood to maturity and youth to age, from innocence to awareness and ignorance to knowing, from foolishness to discretion, and then perhaps to wisdom, from weakness to strength or strength to weakness, and often back again, from health to sickness, and back we pray to health again, from offense to forgiveness, loneliness to love, from joy to gratitude, from pain to compassion, from grief to understanding, from fear to faith, from defeat to defeat to defeat, until looking backward or ahead, we see that victory lies not at some high place along the way, but in having made the journey stage by stage, a sacred pilgrimage. Birth is a beginning and death a destination, and life is a journey, a sacred pilgrimage to life everlasting. And with those words in our hearts, we turn to the words of our Psalms, knowing that these words are words that we have been saying in moments of sorrow and sadness and grief for so many generations. And on a day like today, I just want to share with you one thing. We're going to read Psalm 23, which has this really famous line that you probably know: as I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I shall fear no evil, for you are with me. And one of the things that we know about a shadow is that it only exists if there's light. Shadows are not actually their own separate thing. A shadow is, for a moment, light is blocked. And it is a reminder to us of the beautiful light of Marian's life, of her love, her story, her community, and the friends that she made, and this beautiful legacy that she built. And sometimes it's hard to remember how wonderful that feels when we are blocked with our grief. And so we peel back that shadow for just a second, even when our hearts feel the most sad, so that we can hold both that sadness and the beauty of the light together. Mizmor LeDavid, Adonai ro'i lo achsar, bino deshegar b'tzeini. Amei menuchot yanahaleini, nafshi yeshovev, yancheni b'magalei tzedek lema'an shemo. Gam ki elech begates amavet, lo ira ra ki ata imadi. Shivtecha umishantecha, hema yenachamuni. Ta'aroch lefanai shulchan neged tzorarai, dishanta b'shemen roshi, kosi revaya. Ach tov v'chesed yirdefuni, kol yamei chayai, v'shavti b'veit Adonai le'orech yamim. God is my shepherd, I shall not want. God makes me lie down in green pastures, leads me beside still waters, and restores my soul. God, you lead me in right paths for the sake of your name. Even as I walk in the valley of the shadow of death, I shall fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You have set a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You have anointed my head with oil. My cup overflows. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of God forever. And I want to share with you just one more. It's not even a poem, it's sort of a reading that I was thinking about today when I was thinking about Marian, and I'll tell you why. Well, you might know why after I read it. When I die, give what's left of me away to children and old men that wait to die. And if you need to cry, cry for your brother walking the street beside you. And when you need me, put your arms around anyone and give them what you need to give me. I want to leave you something better than words or sounds. So look for me in the people I've known or loved. And if you cannot give me away, at least let me live in your eyes and not in your mind. You can love me best by letting hands touch hands and souls touch souls, by letting go of children that need to be free. Remember, love doesn't die. People do. So when all that's left of me is love, give me away. And when we were speaking yesterday about Marian, one of the things that her family told me is that she wasn't a huge emoter. That she didn't, even when Joe died, she didn't, break down and sob and couldn't get up and, do the things that sometimes we understandably associate with the kind of grief that one might feel after 60 odd years of marriage. She was a practical woman. And the idea that all of the love that she felt, rather than keeping each of us down in our grief, is something that should be turned around and given away. Felt so much like the pieces of the story that I got to hear about her. And so with that, we turn now to the telling of the rest of that story. And there's a couple of people that are gonna participate in that beautiful tradition and even obligation to tell her story. And so I'm gonna call Judy to begin.
Hi everyone, I'm Judy Schiffer, and I have everything on my phone here, so just give me a sec here. But I just want to say, around a year ago, I flew to Denver to bring my mother back to Maryland for 3 weeks. And over the course of that 3 weeks, she got to see my daughter, Davida, spend time with Mark, spend time with Ditters. I took her to 2 bridge games in the community. We went to the movies. She attended 2 of my book clubs, and we even went for a swim. So that was this special time we had. We tried to make a little bit of chicken soup, matzo balls that had to be soft. But the things that I wanted to make sure I share is my mother lived by many principles in her life. And these were always focused on her family, all the cousins she had, friends, and long relationships she kept with people, keeping of Jewish traditions and having that be the structure of her life, and her drive to have a healthy lifestyle and to encourage everybody else to have somewhat of a healthy lifestyle too. In preparation for every holiday, she'd pull out her recipes, she'd organize her list, she'd go shopping. Of course, she would see somebody in the Stop and Shop that she would have to stand and talk to for extended time periods. We would have Rosh Hashanah. There'd be a first day with one family member and a second day with friends. But she always had a consistent schedule of what worked and what was going to make her life full that day. She was always on the phone with like my grandma Rose, or a cousin, that there was something that she had to share about life in general that day. As we were going through her room, this Rolodex of everybody's phone number. I think she had Hannah's phone number, Emma's phone number, Mark DeVita's, everybody's. Well, and Catherine, so many phone numbers in here, just in case she had to give you a call over the time. She had a regular bridge game in our house in Lexington for like 20 years. Every Wednesday night, these women would get together, and yes, they play bridge. And she continued her connection with people in the games in Florida and golf games and all. I want to talk about her love of projects and planning ahead for a project, whether it's a quilt, something she was knitting, pillow pals that she would give to strangers. My people that I work with have like pillow pals, use comfort items that she wanted to share with others. So the things I will miss most about my mother, gosh, her energy, her spirit, just talking to her about everything going on with our family, and what's going on with her, the news, movies. And every time I go for a swim, it will be for Marian, my mom, because that was part of her spirit of keeping going, keeping moving, taking care of herself, and then relaxing. And thank you all for being here. You know, my mom planned this day, a nice crisp day in Denver with a beautiful sunshine. Thank you for being here.
My mother was a real practical and very productive person. In fact, about 5 years ago, when my father was passing away, he came home on a Thursday. The rabbi came over on a Friday. We had a wonderful Shabbat meal, and my father passed away on a Saturday. Not to be outdone by my father, my mother came home on Wednesday at noon. The rabbi came over at 1:30. Abby arranged a wonderful birthday party Wednesday night, and my mother passed away at 9:30, and she was only home for less than 12 hours. My mother grew up outside in Boston, and there were 10 of them in a 2-bedroom, 1-bath apartment. They had a wonderful upbringing in Boston. After graduating from high school, it was either nursing school or secretary school, and her and her sister picked nursing school, and they had wonderful careers. When it was time to find a husband, of course, they went to the synagogue dance, and my father, and they were married for 65 some odd years. They moved to Lexington, Massachusetts, a wonderful place to raise a family. They had synagogues and bridge clubs and Havurah, and it was a wonderful environment and a great place to grow up. When it came time to retire, they had to move to Florida to get out of the snow and ice, which was another wonderful community. They belonged to the synagogue, the bridge club, the book club, and the movie club, and they played golf, and they had a wonderful time. The only tragedy in my parents' life was the passing away of my sister, and that was the only upset in schedule in my parents' world. We're very fortunate that my sister had 2 wonderful kids. We have Catherine here from London, and there's a husband, Daniel, and 2 kids in London, and we have Will and Angela from Los Angeles. So my sister's memory certainly lives on, and thank you for coming. When my father turned 90, we went down for a birthday party, the 6 of us, me, Hannah, Emma, Linda, and my parents. And my father said, oddly enough, all of our friends are dying or they're moving back to their families. And without any approval from me, Linda said, why don't you move to Denver? And then a couple of months later, one renovated bathroom and getting a place ready in Park Place, my parents moved to Denver. But what my parents didn't realize was that I had married a mailman, and that a table for six was no longer going to work because we had the addition of Abby, Ari, and Jake to the family, which made 9. Cohen and Kenzie made 11, and then happily with Candace, Patrick, and Rachel made 14, and there was always someone from CU or CSU or a friend of the family. So it was a wonderful 9 years that my parents were here and my mother was here, up to last week, and we gave them a lot of love and joy. But what we got in return was so much more. So it was wonderful for all of us to have my mother here and my father here, and we really cherish the years that they were here in Denver. Thank you.
Catherine. Hi. You'll have to excuse me. I only wrote this morning, so I have to look at my notes. Our grandmother was an incredible woman. She made sure to have a big impact on each of her grandchildren's lives. Family was really important to her, and being in her grandchildren's lives was something she worked really hard to do. While all of our experiences with her are unique to each of us, one common thread we all experienced was her joy for life and her energy. My grandmother never sat still, and she was always doing an activity with us. She wanted us to show us new things and for us to experience the world. I think we would all describe her as an energetic grandmother who kept us on her toes. She was not a grandmother who sat still. She was fearless and was always up for an adventure. I will always remember her going on a roller coaster at Santa Monica Pier, and it's such a distinct memory that I will never forget. And I remember going, wow, my grandmother is so cool. She even put her hands up in the air. I never could have imagined a grandmother who would go on a roller coaster with me and really go for it. She had a strong passion to see the world and take advantage of every experience she could. The first international trip I remember them going on was to China. And I remember the stories, photos, and souvenirs she brought back and being fascinated with her trip. Her wonder for the world showed me just how much was out there to see. And as a young child, she opened my eyes to see how big the world could be. Grandma had a love for making. She was a very talented seamstress and quilter. Many of us go to sleep under the quilts she made us, and her love for us is woven into each of those stitches in those quilts. Through the very personal fabric choices that was chosen for each of us personally, that none of our quilts they're all individual to each of us. She chose every single fabric and color based on who we are and what we would like. And even the sizes of the blankets were reflected at what stage we were in our life, whether it was for children being smaller or going off to college and getting a double quilt for your bed. She really thought about us. And each night we all cuddle up under her quilts, and we can feel the love and care she had for each of us. Grandma and Grandpa cared and loved their family so much. They were very proud of what everyone had accomplished throughout their lives and tried to be there for all their grandchildren's big life events, and flew to see all of us graduate from high school as something that was really important to them. Our grandmother loved all of us, and we all loved her. She's an incredible woman filled with a certain je ne sais quoi, and she left us all a little part of her in the things she made for us. So if you ever feel lonely or just need comfort of Grandma, have a little snuggle under one of her quilts or give your pillow pal a squeeze. She'll be right there with you whenever you need her.
Thank you all so much for those beautiful words and the pieces of the puzzle that we're beginning to build. Catherine, I was thinking a lot about what you were just saying last night. When I got to meet Marian really for the first time, it was on Wednesday, like Phil said, just after she had gotten back to their house. And I came in and there were quilts everywhere. There was one on top of her, but there was also two of them draped over like the side of the bed next to her so that she could see them. And then yesterday when I was speaking with her family, there were pillow pals in this, you know, in the middle of the room. Her creations are sort of everywhere. And so I want to share with you, this is called a eulogy for a quilter. A legacy of stitches is what we leave behind, the imprint of our very soul that lasts beyond our time. The heart that quilts knows, oh so well, the peace that can be found as needle meets with fabric, for there is no sweeter sound. Whether quiet piecing done by hand or on a sewing machine, there's rhythm to our stitches as we sew along each seam. Those stitches tell the story of our lives as they unfold, as we think of quilts that a grandma made with stories left untold. The details of our daily lives grow elegant and grand when we start to cut those pieces and stitch fabric in our hands. And whatever is the reason for the quilts we piece and sew, and whoever is the maker, there's one thing that we know. Each quilt is full of memories. It's a treasured thing. If quilts could talk, imagine how some quilts would surely sing. For some are quilts that are sewn in happy times, but others when we're sad. And some are sewn in laughter, and others when we're mad. And some are sewn to warm us, or some just for fun. And some are works in progress that never quite get done, but not if you're Marian. Some quilts are sewn for beauty, a quilt made just for show. But the heart of the true quilter is the one who really knows that no matter how a quilt is stitched, we leave our mark in time, and a legacy of stitches is what we leave behind. As I was sort of thinking about this idea of the quilts and how it played a role in who she was and how we might understand her, I think that certainly the words that Catherine said, that each of you has pieces of her that were designed just for you to keep you warm and make you feel safe. But the other thing that I was thinking about that's so interesting is that this kind of creative work takes a real balance. In order to create a quilt, you need to be able to be so creative and imaginary, but you also have to sort of be strict and regulated and efficient to make a quilt. And it's maybe the perfect metaphor for Marian. While there's so much freedom in the design and the imagination process, the visioning of something that you make for someone else, the pattern and colors and shapes and sizes, there's also great regulation. There are defined steps and order, a recognized process and procedure. There's balance. Love and creativity balanced with order and structure and careful arrangement and perfectly even stitches and very intense expectations. I think Marian was herself a quilt. All of the pieces of her life and her personality stitched together to create the beautiful whole of who she was. And so today we have the privilege and the honor to just look at a couple of those pieces, the ones that stood out to me the most as her beautiful family spoke about her. And so of the pieces that I think were lifted up, the biggest piece is, of course, her love of her family. And as you heard from Phil, and as I got to read a testament by a cousin of hers who wrote a few words down, there were so many of them who lived in a very small apartment, all of them together. And there was just family everywhere, family in every room, family on every trip. And the experiences that really made up the way that she was raised was an experience of true community and of sharing and of probably not very much alone time, one can imagine. And so as Marian built her life full of family as well, it's very clear that there was no real effort that was too much to take care of her family or to be with them and to spend time with them. There was no love that was too much for her and her husband. They had a balance of home and adventure, and they really built a love that I think was about being together and spending that quality time together, but doing lots of activities, which is the second part of the quilt, is that I think Marian was always busy. And some of that I think was independent busy, but a lot of that was busy with others. And in addition to her bridge club and book club and the other and the golf and the community that she built, and Hadassah and her beautiful involvement in her synagogues, her building and keeping of community was, I think, central to who she was. And the idea that she was always on the phone catching up with someone, or that no matter where she went, whether it was, originally in Massachusetts, or when they moved to Lexington, also in Massachusetts, or down to Florida, or even when they were here in Denver, she built community and made friends and did stuff all the time and collected the people that were a part of that. And I think that a piece of that was certainly her Jewish community and the strength with which she loved her Jewish identity and passed that on. That her synagogue, the sisterhood, those were important no matter where she lived. And they were things that she made time for and were a priority. I think there's a whole piece of her quilt, even though we already talked about family, that is dedicated to her life as a grandma and a great grandma. And I got to hear some of those stories yesterday, but for those of you that I didn't get to sit with, I know that there are so many more stories that you can and will continue to tell about the ways that she showed up as a grandma, whether it was on trips, whether it was on Disney cruises, whether it was, really wanting to know about the grandkids and the great grandkids and what they were doing and what they were involved in and what were the opportunities that were in front of them. And she told me one story that I thought particularly, I heard one story yesterday that was particularly beautiful to me from Angela, who's married to Will, who said that Marian took the time to tell her about Anne, Will's mom, and Angela didn't get to meet Anne. And to know that Marian saw that that was a gift that she could give was not just the time spent, but to pass that legacy on. It says so much about who she was. Now, I would be remiss if I didn't also mention that she had perhaps what we might call some high expectations of the people around her and of her family. And it's interesting to think about that part of her, that I think it started with high expectations for herself, perhaps, that she was so efficient and her life was very regulated. And when the kids were growing up, when everyone was younger, everyone in the house had jobs. There was an expectation that everyone participates, that nobody needed to lean on anybody else to run their household, that her children were raised to be so responsible and independent and successful. And we weren't mired in the feelings of what that felt like. They just were doers. And even Phil, who was working at the hospital at a very young age, which I think was probably central to the story of your life after that, would get on his bike and go to the hospital and I think you said draw blood, but I find that really hard to believe and a little scary. So I'm going to just move on from it. But the expectations that she had of her own children when they were young, I think manifested in expectations, They grew up, and then there were high expectations of her grandchildren too, the way that they showed up in places and the way they dressed, and sometimes things that it's a little hard to get feedback on all the time, but she wasn't afraid to share that feedback of how you behave and what it means to show up in a space, because she wanted you to be everything. And I think she knew that you could be everything. And maybe her idea of everything is a little different than our idea today. But I think she really believed it. And as long as Jake didn't cook the steak after the one time that he ruined it. So your mistakes, I understand, were not easily dismissed. And yet, maybe Jake wasn't allowed to cook the steak, but dinner with Jake was still really important. And she was always up for it. And so if we just end back at that balance, right? The thing that I haven't really talked about yet is that she was also a professional woman, right? She went to nursing school and became a nurse and worked full time and had 3 kids and did all of that stuff. She was involved in the synagogue and the sisterhood and the Havurah, and the kids went to Hebrew school twice a week and on Sundays, and she swam after work, and she also was doing these creative projects, perhaps not at the rate that she was doing them later in life, but she did all of those things. Plus she had friends in the neighborhood and all of the cousins that she had grown up with that she was close to. That's a lot of things to do on a regular basis. And that idea that she was just always, it seems to me, invested in the balance of making sure that she took care of herself and took care of her family, that she loved her family and taught them how to take care of themselves, that she did the projects that were interesting and moving to her, but that she was involved and invested in everyone's life, that she had a lot to say about a lot of things all the time and would tell you and wasn't shy about it. And she did it with enormous love and investment. And I think that it's the balance. It's the balance of that quilt, the creativity that it takes to make it, to design it, to picture it in your head, and then the very straight lines that it takes to sew a quilt together, the very deliberate method of starting at one place and ending at another. And at the end, you have this beautiful quilt that you get to use throughout your lives. And so I hope that that legacy is one that reminds us all about the importance of family and love and of independence and of efficiency. I know that I'm really thinking about it and will take it with me, and I hope that it keeps you very warm even when you're missing her. And so with that, we prepare for the next part of our ceremony, the final part of our ceremony, which is saying goodbye to Marian's physical presence here with us as we begin. Adonai Natan ve'Adonai Lakach, Yehi Shem Adonai Mevorach. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher yatzar etchem betuvo v'henit etchem b'adin, v'nata b'tochechem chayei olam. Baruch atah Adonai Dayan ha'emet. Atah gibor le'olam Adonai Rav lehoshia. Mechalkel chaim b'chesed mechayei hakol berachamim rabim. Somech noflim v'rofeh cholim, umatir asurim, umekayem emunato lishenei afar. Mi chamocha, bal diburot umito melech, melech meimit umechayei umatziach Yeshua. Baruch atah Adonai, notea betocheinu chayei olam. Dayan ha'emet, shofet tzedek ve'emet. Baruch Dayan ha'emet, ki chol mishpatav tzedek ve'emet. Nefesh kol chai b'yadecha, tzedek ma'al yamincha b'yadecha. Rachem al plei takson yadecha, v'tomar lemalach teref yadecha. Gadol ha'etza ve'rav ha'aliliyah, asher einecha pekuchot al kol derachai b'nei adam. Latet la'ish kidrachav, v'chifri me'al alav, lahagid ki yashar Adonai, suri v'lo avlatavo. Adonai natan, v'Adonai lakach, Yehi Shem Adonai mevorach, v'hu rachum yechaper avon, v'lo yashlit, v'hirba lehashiv apo, v'lo ya'ir kol chamato. Adonai has given, Adonai has taken away. Blessed is the name of God. Eternal is your might, O God. You give life, and great is your power. In love, you sustain the living. In your mercy, you sustain us all. Blessed are you, Adonai, who gives eternal life to the departed. And before we conclude our service in just a few moments, we have one more obligation that we get to give to Marian. And that is that in Jewish tradition, we help to fill the grave of our loved one with earth. It's a hard thing to do. It's supposed to be hard. And we understand it as something that we need to do to make sure that she is in this place, that she is safe and peaceful, and that we ourselves have not just seen it, but we have participated in that peace. And so for all of her children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren and all of the people in their lives, and for all of you knowing that she spent such time making sure each of you were safe and cozy and giving pillow pals to people she'd never met before and would never see again, we get to tuck her in one last time to make sure that this place is safe, that it is peaceful for her. And so I am going to invite up just sort of the immediate family, though in this situation that is so many people, but I'm going to invite up a number of people to participate. Then we'll conclude our service, and then anyone else for whom this is a tradition that speaks to you and you would like to participate, I invite you to, as soon as our service concludes, to help put some earth into the grave. So I'm going to invite first Marian's children, and then that includes partners, spouses, and then I'm going to invite grandchildren and great-grandchildren, and then we'll take a pause to conclude our service. If grandchildren and great-grandchildren want to come and follow along. And with that, I'm going to ask you to please rise as you are able for our memorial prayer. We're going to say the words of El Male Rachamim, and then we'll join together in the words of the mourners Kaddish. El Male Rachamim, Shochen Bamromim, Hamsei Menucha Nechona, Tachat Kanfei Hashchina, Im Kedoshim Utehorim, Kezohar Harakiam Azirim, Et Nishmat Musa Braina Bat David Beruza, Shehalacha Leolama, Balarachamim Yasireha, Beseter Knafav Leolamim, Bitzror Chaim, Et Nishmata, Adonai Hu Nachalata, Betanuach B'Shalom, Al Mishkava Venomar. Amen. God of abundant mercy, God most high, may the soul of our loved one who has gone into eternity find the gift of perfect peace in your embrace, together with the holy and pure whose light shines like the radiance of heaven. Compassionate God, hold Marian Barbara Mason close to you forever so that her soul may be bound up in the bond of life eternal. May she find a home with you, and may she rest in peace. And together we say, Amen. We continue with the words of the mourners Kaddish, officially for the first time, knowing that these are words that for the next year, for the next many years, will bring you back to a moment of memory and hopefully a moment of love and comfort. We say these words together. Yitkadal v'yitkada shemei Rabbah, ve'alma dibra chirutei ve'amlich malchutei. B'chayechon u'b'yomechon u'chayei dechol beit Yisrael ba'agala u'bizman kariv v'imru amen. Yehei shmei Rabbah mevorach le'olam v'le'amei amaya. Yitvarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitramam v'yitnaseh v'yithadar v'yitaleh v'yitalal shmei dekudisha b'richu. La'ela min kol birchata v'shirata, tushbachata v'nechemata, v'amiran be'alma v'yimru amen. Yehei shlama rabba min shemaya, v'chayim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'yimru amen. Oseh shalom v'romav, hu ya'aseh shalom, aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'yimru amen. May the one who makes peace on high make peace for us and for all of Israel, as we say together, Amen. And as we conclude, there is Shiva this evening at Phil and Linda's. The minyan, the prayer service will be at 5:30. There are cards over by the table right there that have the directions and the address of where to go, so that those who want to join together can do so.
And lunch now. The directions will take you immediately there, so that if anybody wants to come for lunch. Go your way, for God has called you. Go your way, and may God be with you. May your righteousness go before you, and the glory of God receive you. And in conclusion, we say words that we say to mourners of every kind in every age. May God comfort you amongst the mourners of Zion and Jerusalem. Anyone else who would like to participate, please.
It's more like you, isn't it? You don't know these songs? What? You come back.